Así que le damos un fuerte aplauso a Jeff. Bienvenido, Jeff.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Very excited to be here with you. Cool. Yeah? All right. All right, let's get started. We have a very busy schedule. We have 20 minutes. Let me get the timer going. All right, so my name is Jeff. The title is Variant Analysis, Identifying and Addressing Related Vulnerabilities for Profit. This talk is separated for corporate people. What do you do when a bug comes in? You know, how do you squeeze the return on investment when you receive a bug from a researcher or an external source? And as a bug hunter, how can you do this for profit, right? How can you turn it around and get somebody's research and immediately get started on it? So I'm splitting this talk in half. I have case studies on both. And if you have any questions, please ask me after. So who am I? I'm a security engineer at GitHub. On the product security side, I manage and lead the bug bounty program along with some other fun stuff. I love driving fast cars. When I have time, I try to race and go to the racetrack. So if you like doing that, let's chat. I love building and maintaining bug bounty programs. It's just something I'm super passionate about. I started my career doing bug bounty, and then my first job outside of college was managing a program, so it was so cool. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it. I've been on both sides. Bug hunting on my free time, which is very short. And then web security, it's all I've really focused on ever. So the overview, what are we getting out of this conversation? It's a definition of variant analysis, tools and techniques. We're going over some case studies, tips, tricks, and advice. And then finally, the conclusion. So what is variant analysis? So the formal definition is it's the process of taking a known problem and finding other occurrences of that problem. So, in theory, it sounds easy. Oh, yeah, let's take this problem and look elsewhere. There's a lot of ways you can approach this. And again, back to the conversation of being split, it differs from an internal security perspective, right? From an internal corporate employee versus when you're bug hunting for profit. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention, huge thank you to all of our sponsors. Yes, we Hack, Mercado Libre, Meta, BugCrowd, HackerOne, Sancor Seguros, Brotech, and ArtSec. Why is it important? Why is variant analysis important? And there's different bullet points for different purposes, right? So you want to find related affected areas. If you're on the product security standpoint, you want to see where else are my products affected. This vulnerability is probably not unique to this specific product. Are we using like a vulnerable like authentication method or whatever, right? Like where else can we see this? Obviously earn money, right? Time and effort can be minimal. It depends on how you approach it. And we'll talk about that in our case study. It's a great starting point for research. So when you're reading through Hacktivity and you're reading disclosed reports, you get to see a little bit, right? You get to see like the behind the scenes on how a hacker found, the vulnerability they found, but you might have your own perspective of what could have been missed or what you could do to add to it. So let's go over some tools and techniques, and there's a lot. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but they're extremely important, but it depends on your own interests, your own level of knowledge at the time. You could do code analysis, right? You could look for patterns, historical data, right? That's something I use a lot. I look at past reports that look similar, or how has this changed over the time? Automated testing, right? Like automation's great, but it can only take you so far. Static code analysis, right? There's a lot of tools that can help you and give you like a starting point, so that's awesome. Dynamic analysis and data flow analysis. Obviously, it depends on what you're testing or what you're protecting, right? Again, that's split view. But these tools are kind of the ones that come to mind for me when I'm looking at something either as a hunter or as a security professional internally. So here are some techniques. Again, you'll have your own. These are just what came to mind to me when I was writing this presentation and what I do on a day-to-day, which is something I really try to implement at my company. I do a lot of manual testing. A lot of people are super good at the automation stuff, and I love the manual testing. I just find more value for me personally. So I focus on manual testing. I use things like mind mapping software, right? Things like Miro, MindMaster, etc. I'll give you an example of a MindMaster that I created when I was doing some research on something in like 2 slides. It's also very important to break down your goals into smaller goals. Like, what do you want to get out of it today? Like in the next 3 hours of testing, I want to explore this specific feature, or I want to explore how authentication is done here. I want to know where all the GraphQL endpoints are. Like, breaking it down kind of helps you avoid burnout and get you, stay on track to conduct your analysis. Because variant analysis could take days or it could take weeks or months. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on your goals too. Are you financially motivated? Are you, internally, is there a feature going out that you really want to finish testing? It just depends, and breaking them down really helps guide that. And then this is a big one. Document as you explore. Whatever works for you. You could draw them out. You could use a mind mapping software, because as you find things, you'll want to go back and realize, how did I find this? And I've found myself many times looking through maybe like 70 of my burp intruders or repeaters and being like, I forgot when I found this. Or, I look back at my handwriting and I'm like, oh, I kind of forgot. So mind mapping and documenting is the way to go. It makes it easier when you're looking back. So we're going to start with an internal case study. I know at Ekoparty, they like big examples and big stories, so I thought I'd bring one that means a lot to me personally. And so we had something around renaming and tombstoning user namespaces. So when you have an account or an organization and then the repo name, that is a namespace altogether, right? And so we had a few bug reports that came in that said, hey, I can bypass the way you reserve namespaces. I found it like this. And then after 2 reports, I decided this seems like an issue that is bigger than just 2 reports. I think this is more than these 2 researchers have found, right? And so what I did is I immediately started thinking, what am I looking for? Am I actually looking for other ways that namespaces are reserved? Again, account or enterprise or org / and the repository name. How does that happen? Can I look at the code and figure out where that logic lives? That's a good thing. You, as an internal employee, you have access to the code base, so that helps a lot. And so I'm thinking, what's the actual bug here? Is the actual bug focused on these 2 features, or these 2 spots where the bug is? Or is the actual bug that up even higher than that? Is it the entire logic where namespaces belong? And so what was reported and what seems that hasn't been explored? Like, what does it seem like from these reports that they haven't checked yet? And what can I check? And how can I map this out? Like, how can I make it, visual? Because I'm a very visual person, so how can I make it visual to see what is actually happening? And so I immediately started mapping stuff out. So I was like, what's the kind of behavior that includes a namespace? And so I thought to myself, renaming. When you rename an account, when you rename an org or an enterprise or an account, a user account, what happens then? What about transferring? What if I transfer from one account to another account? What happens if I archive? Will that namespace be reserved? I started asking myself all these questions. And then obviously race conditions. Around this time, James Kettle released his research on race condition stuff, right? So I was like, oh, let's include that in the way I'm gonna break down this bug. And so this is very simple. I could have shown you so much more, but I thought this was like the cleaner version. And so the way I break it down manually is just drawing everything. And now I've used more software so I can document it better. But this is kind of how I approach this case study. And I found a few more vulnerabilities, vulnerable ways to do this based on the way I broke it down. I was really happy about that, and we were able to fix them and beat other bug hunters in the process, which I'm sorry, but that was fun. That was fun for me. But now we're going to talk about an external use case, right? And so there's a lot of misconfigurations out there in everything you can imagine. if you remember a few years ago, there was something called Ticket Trick. And Ticket Trick was something that was related to Zendesk and Slack and the way that user like emails are done. And so this was an external case. I remember it, and I feel like I keep seeing this pop up. And so I kind of wanted to talk about it and how other researchers have kind of taken that research that was done by Inti 7 years ago, and they just continue to iterate off of that research. And so here I have the definition. I took it from Inti's blog site. The actual vulnerability exists if support tickets can be created through email and if support tickets are accessible by users with an unverified email addresses. It also exists in public issue trackers or responders providing a unique @company.com email address to submit information directly to a ticket, forum post, private message, or user account. And so we'll talk a little bit about it. This is, his blog post from, like 7 years ago. And it was huge. When it dropped, everyone was like, am I vulnerable? And the answer was, you probably are. And so, he did a lot of research with a lot of other companies, reported them, and then he just dropped the research. And everyone started, conducting their own variant analysis. And so he said how I hacked hundreds of companies through their help desk. And to me, the thought process for me when that came in was, which companies issue company-provided email domains that I can take advantage of? Which he kind of calls out in this article. He says GitLab does it, GitHub does it, and a ton of others. And so if you don't need to be verified with those, you can immediately start doing things like signing up for Slack instances or just a bunch of stuff and see if it works, right? Because that's part of the process. And this is just a quick way, to show like more than 15 reports kind of popped up after Ticket Trick popped up or was dropped. And these are kind of recent. Like some of these are from the last few, maybe 2 years. And just a few weeks ago, actually, there was like a big Zendesk bug that dropped that was like 50K plus. And so I wanted to drop this screenshot here to show you that people kind of pick up other people's research and just continue to do variants of it, right? And I love that. I think that's incredible. There's a lot of pros and cons to it, but the pros are you could get started, with a baseline at least. And if you haven't checked out Critical Thinking, I would definitely check them out. They are a bug bounty podcast who are amazing, but I'm sure you've heard of them. But yeah, they recently did this, like last year, and it was really good. So, quickly, using AI for variant analysis, right? To conclude, there's a lot of ways you can do variant analysis. Lately, I've been trying to see how I can use things like Copilot or ChatGPT, Bard, like all of these, and see how can I use them to help me with this mission of mine. Because I have a lot of variant analysis cases that are sitting in my backlog. How can I make it a little bit faster, right? How can I automate this a little bit better? And so it helps me in automating, producing effective fuzzing inputs, context-driven recommendations, right? That one you have to fine-tune. I think it depends on how you're prompting your AI friend. And so for me, I've used Copilot very extensively. Obviously, I work at GitHub, and so we've been using it for so long internally. And so I know how to work with it, right? How to prompt it for the right things. And so I feel like I get good recommendations on what to do next because it really understands what I'm doing. But it does need fine-tuning and training. And there's a ton of options, right? There's a ton that continue to pop up and come up. And so in conclusion, from an org perspective, right, from an internal security perspective, these benefit you because they give you holistic fixes. You don't just fix something and forget about it, right? Kind of like that phrase, fire and forget. You fix something and you feel pretty confident that you did an exhaustive research on that vulnerability that came in. And there's a time and effort and money perspective there, right? If you have a security team that is very slammed and they don't have a lot of time, it's hard to dedicate time to variant analysis. But when you are, the rewards are very good. You can really get like the most return on investment in that bug. You can really fix, from a bird's eye view, you can fix a lot like that. And it helps reduce variance, right? You spend more time fixing stuff. You spend more time like burning like engineering hours and writing more fixes and checking is the fix the same as last time. And so variant analysis up front can cost you time, but in the back end, it really helps you. helps reduce bug reports and money if that's, if that's a metric that your company tracks, which would make sense. Comprehensive fixes during incidents, right? When an incident's going on, you want to make sure you don't just fix it and then you forget, right? And then you just move on. Because there could be incident repair items after, like things you should fix after. But if you don't do them then, you might forget if you don't document them correctly. From a bug hunter perspective, time and effort can be minimal. You can pick up someone's research and kind of give your own flavor to it and say, oh, I see in this research they focused on these companies. I think I'm going to focus on this other sector because I think they do this differently. And yeah, I do think it's a great starting point for research. I think, I don't know about you, but when I personally approach a new research topic, I just dive deep into it. I don't sleep for days, and I just it consumes me. And so when I read other people's research, it gives me a more healthier way to start and then kind of set goals along the way because I see what's been done. And I think that's as someone who's a little bit earlier on my career, I think that's been really helpful for me. And then a ton of collaboration opportunities. I just had dinner with Tom. I don't think he's here, but Tom Nom Nom, and yesterday he gave me a ton of ideas of things I wanted to do when I approached new variants, and so collaboration and just talking to other people about the research you're doing gives you a ton of collaboration opportunities, and it's awesome. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, and I also want to thank the Bug Bounty Argentina chapter. I don't know if they're in here, but if you see them out there, thank them. This is really hard to host every year. It's a lot of work. So please make sure you say thank you. They're awesome people. And I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for sitting and checking out my talk. If you're interested in connecting, I'm always happy to chat. There's my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and bugbountycoi.org. If you're a bug bounty manager, that website is an organization of some of us who write articles on how to host a good bug bounty program and how to improve your bug bounty program. So if you're hosting one or you want to host one, I would really recommend checking it out. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. ¿Alguna pregunta? Acá tenemos pregunta. A ver, gracias. ¿Puede ser en español? Siempre que tenés la oportunidad de hacer el variance analysis, ¿preferís ir al código fuente o buscas otra alternativa primero? ¿Qué te resulta mejor a la hora de hacerlo?
¿Como bug bounty o como internal security?
Si puede ser las dos, mejor.
Yeah. Como internal, in internal, I can check out the code base. I can really focus on the routes. I can focus on what's going on. For us at GitHub, we're Ruby. We're a Ruby shop. So I get to just check out everything that's related to that one route, or I get to focus on where the logic is, right? And then from there, I follow the lines. And that's why mind mapping helps me a lot, because I get to, I start with the logic is here. It talks to this feature. It talks to this feature. That feature then talks to this feature. So mind mapping with the code base is so good, right? But if you don't have the code base and you're a bug hunter, right? It depends on what you're looking for, right? Like if you're looking at something that's like web related, right? And you only know the vulnerability, and maybe you can see the fix, right? You can see, hey, but I think this behavior is still going on in these other features. And so you go and you just test them. And that's why I think manual testing and variant analysis is essential, because you see what's been done and then you kind of reverse it and you do it in other features. It's a little harder when you're doing bug hunting, right? But the thing is, if you have disclosed reports or you have documentation or CVEs, it's a little easier to like reverse it. Sometimes I've seen people create like a nuclei template, after they've seen a CVE, and then they start using it against like instances, but that's a different conversation. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Perfect. Una remera por ahí, ya anotado. Ahora venía por... ¿Alguna otra pregunta más? ¿Estamos? Hay una pregunta más por aquí. Voy. Gracias, amigo.
Buenas, gracias. Muy buena la charla. Al principio de la charla mencionaste un par de herramientas que utilizas para mind maps, pero quisiera saber sobre las notas. ¿Utilizas algún template para tomar notas o empezás con una página en blanco en alguna herramienta en particular? quisiera saber cómo es el approach en las notas.
So my approach is I use Obsidian for notes, and then from there I prefer to use like blank mind masters because it depends on what I'm looking at, right? Some features are very complex, and so I need a lot of space, and others are kind of small. Like the one I showed you, that was kind of small, right? Like the root of it was, what is a namespace? And from there, there's only 4 or 5 other ways to do it. And so that simple one made sense. It's hard to have a template because what I test is very different. But you'll find what works for you. I would start with just simple and then see, you know, hey, I think I always end up doing like 2 themes and then I branch out. And then you could do that. But for me, it's always just a blank. But maybe that's how my mind works, you know, maybe that just makes sense for me. But I would see, you know, what works for you. I know a lot of people like Miro. I've been using MyMaster for some time, but I might try out Miro soon.
Thank you.
Buenísimo. Bueno, creo que estamos con alguna pregunta más. Levante la mano. Perfecto, muchas gracias. Allá, mirá, allá al fondo. Lea.
¿Cuáles son los casos de uso si han tenido usando las guías para el Boconti? Casos de uso que han tenido usando las diferentes guías para el Boconti.
Use cases for different guides for background. Casos de uso de la inteligencia artificial.
Yeah, I've used AI for different things. So like, you know, if I find like a password or a token or something and I want to list all the API endpoints, I would use something like Copilot or Bard or something to give me basically to make the documentation and reading the documentation much faster and easier. And so using AI to do those little tasks, you know, that you don't really want to do, that's what I use it for. I don't really use it that much for like code suggestions or all that. Maybe like, hey, I wrote this like program and it doesn't really work. Can you help me debug it? That sometimes helps, but I think right now where AI is, like there's for writing stuff like this or for variant analysis, there's a lot of unique cases. And the way I just use it is to help me consume documentation and go from there. But I'm sure other people have figured out how to use it much more effectively. It just depends what you're hacking. But for me, I just use it like that.
Great. Thank you so very much, Jeff. Un aplauso para Jeff. Excelente charla.